David and Simone Barrett had become something of a power couple in Montego Bay, Jamaica. He was the charismatic owner of Eclipse, a popular upscale nightclub that pulsed with music, celebrities, and tourists year-round. She was a former beauty queen turned social media influencer with nearly 100,000 followers and a stream of flawless vacation photos, designer brands, and beachside sunsets. Their love, or what remained of it, had started on that very same coastline nearly 6 years ago. David had spotted Simone at a resort lounge party, her laughter bright and magnetic. Simone had fallen for his confidence, charm, and wealth. It wasn't long before their romance dominated local tabloids, culminating in a lavish wedding at Half Moon Resort. But by their 5th anniversary, things were no longer perfect, at least not beneath the surface. Still, to outsiders, the Barretts seemed like a dream couple. To celebrate their anniversary, David chartered a private luxury yacht named the Golden Siren for a week-long sail through the Caribbean, an exclusive route that would take them through the serene waters between Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, and back. It was marketed as a once-in-a-lifetime romantic voyage, and it came with a private chef, a seasoned captain, and a small, discreet crew. For Simone, the trip was a mixed blessing. On one hand, it was a chance to escape the suffocating routine of her influencer life, where every smile felt staged and every post was calculated. On the other, she couldn't shake the anxiety that had been growing inside her, an unnamed dread she couldn't yet explain. Still, she played her part. She smiled for the camera. She posted a story captioned, "Sailing into forever with my one and only." The yacht was opulent, with mahogany interiors, champagne on ice, and a sun deck that offered sweeping views of turquoise waters. Simone had brought along 3 designer suitcases packed with beachwear, heels, and silky gowns. David had brought something else, an air of agitation, made worse by the intermittent Wi-Fi, lack of control, and Simone's increasing emotional distance. They boarded the yacht in the harbor of Port Antonio early that Monday morning. Captain Luis Navarro, a tall, tanned, and soft-spoken former naval officer, greeted them warmly. "Welcome aboard the Golden Siren. You're in for a beautiful voyage," he said with a smile. Simone shook his hand and returned the smile. David nodded curtly, already scanning the deck with the scrutinizing eyes of a man who was used to control. The crew included 2 others, Rico, a 24-year-old deckhand from the Dominican Republic with a lean build and easy grin, and Marla, a cook from St. Lucia known for her 5-star Caribbean dishes. From the moment the yacht pushed off into the open sea, Simone tried to breathe. The wind tangled in her curls, the sea sparkled under the sun, and for the first time in months, there were no paparazzi, no fans, and no staged smiles. Just ocean, sky, and silence. That first night, they dined on the upper deck as the sun melted into the horizon. Marla served grilled lobster tails, plantains, and champagne. The couple toasted to 5 years of marriage. David even smiled, his guard seemingly down. Simone, dressed in a flowing white dress, looked radiant. A photo taken that night would later be found on her phone. Simone looking at the sunset, David looking at her. But behind his smile, David's mind was racing. He had seen messages the night before they boarded the yacht. A name, Jaden, had appeared on Simone's screen, followed by a heart emoji. When she saw him looking, she quickly swiped it away. He hadn't said anything at the time. This wasn't just an anniversary trip. It was the beginning of something far more sinister. Despite the outward glamour of their yacht getaway, David and Simone Barrett were a couple running on fumes. But within the lavish master suite below deck, silence echoed louder than any wave. It wasn't just the silence of comfort. It was the suffocating quiet of unspoken accusations and unhealed wounds. Simone often sat by the small porthole in their cabin, journaling when David wasn't looking. She wrote in quick, tense strokes, writing not just thoughts, but secrets. In one entry, she wrote, "This yacht is beautiful, but I feel trapped. I thought this trip would save us. Maybe I was wrong." From the outside, she still played her part. She posed on the deck in designer bikinis, uploaded curated Instagram stories with captions like "unbothered and sun-kissed," and clinked wine glasses with David at dinner. But she had grown tired of pretending, tired of the gaslighting, tired of the apologies that came only after outbursts. David, for his part, was spiraling. The messages from Jaden, her ex from years before, had awakened something primitive in him. It wasn't just jealousy, it was possessiveness, rage. He kept replaying the sight of that heart emoji in his head like a drumbeat. Every time Simone laughed, every time she glanced at her phone, he wondered if she was thinking of someone else. He began to monitor her subtly, watching her phone when she wasn't looking, timing how long she spent in the bathroom, even questioning Marla and Rico, under the guise of friendly chatter, about Simone's behavior. Simone noticed. She had always noticed. But instead of confrontation, she buried herself in distraction. Sunbathing alone, asking to help Marla in the kitchen, spending quiet time at the edge of the boat with headphones on. It was during one of these solitary moments on the upper deck that Simone struck up a casual conversation with Rico, the young deckhand. He was funny, polite, and not the least bit intimidated by her celebrity. He complimented her taste in music, told stories of sailing along the Dominican coast, and made her laugh in a way she hadn't laughed in months. David noticed that too. That evening, after a shared dinner, David and Simone retreated to their suite. The silence between them felt heavier than ever. Then, like a wave breaking against rocks, David's voice sliced through the calm. "So you're laughing with the help now?" he asked, his tone deceptively calm. Simone didn't respond immediately. She set down her wine glass and turned to face him. "He's a person, David, not the help. And he was being kind. Something you might want to try." David's jaw clenched. He stood from the bed, pacing the room like a lion in a cage. "I saw your messages. Jaden, you thought I wouldn't notice." Simone's face froze. Her stomach turned. She hadn't realized he'd seen them. The conversation with Jaden had been brief, and it wasn't even romantic, just nostalgic. He had messaged her, "Saw you on Instagram. Still glowing. Hope you're happy." She had replied, "Thank you. Hope you're doing well too." It was innocent, but not to David. "You went digging through my phone?" she asked, her voice rising now. "That's what this is about?" "You're my wife," he spat. "I have the right to know when you're sneaking around behind my back." Simone took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "There's nothing to sneak around about. But maybe if you focused less on controlling me and more on being a decent husband, I wouldn't have to talk to someone else to feel like I matter." That stung. David turned away from her, fists clenched. That night, they didn't sleep together. Simone curled up on the chaise lounge near the cabin window. David lay in bed, eyes wide open in the dark, staring at the ceiling, his chest rising and falling with controlled fury. The next morning, the tension lingered like fog. David didn't join her for breakfast. Simone ate quietly with the crew, and for the first time, she began to wonder if she should ask Captain Navarro to cut the trip short. But she didn't, because part of her still hoped that somewhere on this voyage, beneath the pain and the paranoia, there was a man she once loved. A man who would remember the promises they made, the laughter they once shared. But she didn't know the truth yet. She didn't know that David had stopped hoping long ago. He had started planning. What was supposed to be a romantic escape now simmered with growing tension. Tension not just between David and Simone Barrett, but among the crew members who served them. Captain Luis Navarro was a man of the sea, calm, disciplined, and watchful. A former officer in the Venezuelan Navy, he had been captaining private yachts for over 15 years. He could sense conflict the same way he could sense an oncoming storm. And what he saw between the Barretts had all the signs of a tempest brewing. He noticed how David's eyes followed Rico, the young deckhand, whenever he spoke to Simone. He noticed Simone's sadness masked behind designer sunglasses and forced smiles. He noticed the way the couple didn't touch anymore, not even by accident. Luis wasn't one to get involved in guests' personal affairs, but something about this voyage felt wrong. And it wasn't just the couple. Rico, just 24, was sharp and energetic but also naive in some ways. He hadn't meant to get in the middle of anything. He just enjoyed talking to Simone. She was kind, down to earth, and curious about his life beyond deck work. But even he had begun to feel David's icy stares. On the third day, David accidentally bumped into him while walking across the deck, muttering something under his breath in patois Rico didn't fully understand. But the message was clear: stay away from my wife. Marla, the chef, noticed the tension too. She had worked countless charters, cooked for diplomats, celebrities, and the elite, but she had learned to read danger in people's eyes. And David's eyes had started to shift, narrower, darker, more suspicious with every passing meal. She tried to ignore it at first, staying in her kitchen space, but she heard the arguments through the thin walls, the muffled shouting, the silence that followed, the sound of Simone crying one night. She kept it to herself, until one evening, Simone found her in the galley, chopping vegetables for dinner, and simply whispered, "Do you ever feel trapped?" Marla paused. She met Simone's eyes. There was a long silence. "Sometimes," Marla replied carefully. "But the ocean has a way of reminding us we can't run forever." Meanwhile, Captain Navarro was dealing with another concern. Before they had set sail, David had made a quiet request, an unusual one. He asked the captain not to allow any unscheduled calls or internet access during the trip unless it was an emergency. When Navarro pressed him for a reason, David had simply said, "We're trying to reconnect. I want no distractions." It seemed romantic on the surface. But now, knowing what he did, Navarro suspected it was something more controlling, something darker. And then came the incident on the fourth day. It began small. A broken wineglass during lunch. Simone had knocked it off the table by mistake. But David's reaction was far from reasonable. He stood up suddenly, slamming his napkin down, and glared at her. Of course, another mess for someone else to clean up. Rico rushed over with a towel and broom, but David waved him off. "She's good at making messes, not so good at cleaning them up." Simone flushed red with humiliation. Marla looked down, pretending not to hear. Captain Navarro, seated across the deck at a respectful distance, didn't say a word, but his jaw tightened. That night, Navarro quietly approached Simone while David was asleep in the suite. She was sitting alone on the top deck, wrapped in a shawl, eyes fixed on the moonlit waves. "If you need to cut this trip short," he said gently, "we can make a call to port." Simone shook her head slowly. "Not yet." She didn't say more and he didn't press. But he knew something had to give, because for all the crew's professionalism, they were still human. And everyone on that yacht, whether guest or worker, was now entangled in a web of suspicion, jealousy, and quiet desperation. And none of them knew that one of them would not survive this voyage. By the fifth day, the mood aboard the Golden Siren had turned eerie. Gone were the laughter and clinking glasses. Meals were eaten in near silence. The once joyful excursions to private coves or snorkeling reefs were now either cancelled or quietly ignored. Even the sunlight felt colder, as if the ocean itself sensed something was brewing. Simone stood alone on the bow that morning, watching the horizon. She wore a flowing white sarong and a sun hat, looking every bit the celebrity bride enjoying paradise, but her eyes betrayed a storm inside her. There was a new emotion settling in her gaze. Fear. She had caught David going through her handbag the night before. When she confronted him, he denied it, gaslighting her until she doubted her own memory. But the signs were mounting. Her favorite necklace had gone missing. Her journal was out of place. And worst of all, her phone, a lifeline she had started to guard closely, was found with the screen unlocked and the battery mysteriously drained. David, meanwhile, had retreated into a quiet, brooding rage. He drank more, slept less. He paced the yacht at night like a ghost, whispering to himself. The jealousy over Simone's brief interactions with Rico had morphed into obsession. His thoughts circled around betrayal and humiliation, two things David Barrett, a man built on ego and public image, could never tolerate. Captain Navarro watched everything unfold with increasing unease. He had begun secretly logging the couple's behavior in the ship's captain's log, something he hadn't done in years. He suspected domestic abuse, but the situation was delicate. There was no official complaint, and Simone insisted she was fine every time he tried to help. Still, Navarro kept the yacht's satellite phone within reach, quietly checking weather reports and mentally mapping the fastest route to the nearest port, just in case. Then, on the sixth night, the skies finally began to shift. A thin line of dark clouds began forming in the distance, stretching across the horizon like a bruise. Captain Navarro studied the radar and determined it was only a minor squall, nothing dangerous. Still, he advised the crew to begin securing loose items on the deck and preparing the yacht for rougher waters overnight. Rico took his orders seriously. As he coiled ropes and latched down the dining set near the stern, he noticed Simone sitting alone under the covered lounge canopy, sipping wine. He hesitated for a moment, then approached her. "Rough waters ahead," he said casually, trying to lighten the mood. She looked up and gave a weak smile. "Already feel like I've been in a storm all week." There was silence for a moment. Then Simone whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Do you think people can sense when something bad is going to happen?" Rico's expression shifted. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she set her wineglass down, stood up, and placed a hand on his arm. "Be careful tonight, Rico." And then she walked away. Later that evening, a dinner was served on the upper deck. It was meant to be a return to normal: grilled seafood, fine wine, soft jazz playing over the speakers. But the tension was unshakable. Simone barely touched her food. David drank heavily, locking eyes with her at odd moments, as if daring her to speak. Marla kept her head down, pretending not to notice the Cold War playing out between them. By 10 p.m., the rain had started soft at first, then steadily heavier. Wind lashed at the sails and the sea began to roll harder beneath the yacht's hull. Captain Navarro announced that everyone should remain below deck for the night and brace for minor turbulence. At midnight, as thunder cracked in the distance and waves began slapping harder against the sides, a scream tore through the boat. It came from the main corridor outside the couple's suite. Rico was the first to arrive. He found Simone standing barefoot in the hallway, drenched in rain from the slightly ajar upper hatch, her eyes wild and shaking. "He's gone," she said in a trembling voice. "David's gone. He's not in the room, and there's blood." Captain Navarro came next, then Marla. The crew quickly gathered as lightning lit up the corridor and the storm pounded around them. Simone led them into the master suite. The bed was empty, the sheets were stained red, and the balcony door was swinging open to the raging sea. David Barrett, celebrity entrepreneur, husband, and rising star, was gone. And just like that, the perfect getaway had become a nightmare. Rain lashed the deck. Wind howled like an ancient omen. But it was the silence inside the master suite that screamed the loudest. David Barrett was gone. Captain Luis Navarro stood over the blood-stained sheets, his jaw clenched. The crew stood just behind him, staring in disbelief, except for Simone, who sat on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, staring into nothing. Her hair clung to her face, her lips trembled, but she said nothing more. It was as if she'd gone into shock. Navarro wasted no time. He ordered Rico to lock down the yacht, account for all passengers and crew, and then radioed for emergency support. Despite the ongoing storm, he managed to send a distress signal and contact the nearest Coast Guard vessel, which was hours away. The questions began immediately, first among the crew, then from Navarro himself. How much blood was too much? Where exactly had David last been seen? Had anyone heard a struggle? A splash? A cry for help? No one had answers. Rico swore he had checked the deck before midnight. There was nothing unusual. No one had seen David leave the suite. The only odd thing he remembered was Simone's cryptic warning earlier. "Be careful tonight." Captain Navarro quietly noted that. He also couldn't ignore the contradictions. The sheets were soaked with blood, but there was no sign of blood anywhere else. No trail leading out to the deck, no smears on the balcony railing, no evidence of a violent struggle. Just the bed and the open balcony door. Had David been stabbed in bed? Had his body been thrown overboard? Or had he walked out, wounded and delirious, and vanished into the sea himself? Navarro stepped out onto the rain-slicked balcony. Waves crashed violently below. If someone had fallen or been pushed, there was little hope of survival. But still, the captain had been on the water long enough to know when something didn't add up. And this didn't. Inside, Simone finally spoke. Her voice was distant, mechanical, like she wasn't talking to them, but to herself. He had nightmares sometimes. Said he saw shadows at sea. Said they whispered things. I thought he was just being dramatic. Marla exchanged a glance with Navarro. Was this trauma talking? Or something else? Simone turned her eyes toward the others, suddenly lucid. He thought I was cheating. Said I embarrassed him. He started accusing me of hiding things, of lying. He wasn't the same man anymore. There was a pause. And then she added, he said if I ever betrayed him, he'd make sure no one could have me. The room went still. Rico shifted uncomfortably. Captain Navarro folded his arms. He was trained to handle storms, but this was a different kind of danger. Emotional, psychological, the kind that could sink a soul faster than the sea. They needed answers, and soon they would get them, because in less than 6 hours the Coast Guard would arrive. And once they did, this wouldn't just be a missing person case. It would become a criminal investigation. And everyone on board, the grieving wife, the suspicious deckhand, the observant chef, even the captain himself, would be under scrutiny. Because when a man vanishes on a private yacht in the middle of the ocean, someone always knows more than they say. By dawn, the storm had passed, but the dark cloud over the Golden Siren remained. The Coast Guard patrol boat, sleek, white, and bristling with authority, arrived just after sunrise. It approached with sirens off, cutting through the sea with clinical precision. Moments later, 2 smaller vessels detached and circled the yacht like sharks. Within minutes, armed officers in rainproof gear boarded the luxury vessel, their boots thudding against the polished deck. Captain Navarro greeted them solemnly, handing over his logbook and surveillance records. He'd done all he could to preserve the scene, isolating the master suite, preserving the bloodstains, and ensuring no one left their cabins unsupervised. Lieutenant Marissa Tate led the team. Sharp-eyed and methodical, Tate was not here for a rescue mission. She'd read the distress call, a blood-soaked bed, a missing husband, a wealthy couple on a romantic getaway turned nightmare. These things don't just happen. Someone, she believed, knew exactly what had occurred. The interrogations began. Simone Barrett was first. Wrapped in a navy robe, she looked haunted but composed. She sat across from Lieutenant Tate in the yacht's enclosed dining lounge. A medic stood by, but Simone waved him off. Her voice was soft, but clear. We had an argument. He was drinking. Said he knew about me and Rico. That wasn't true. But he was convinced. He slapped me. I locked myself in the bathroom. When I came out, he was gone. There was blood on the sheets. The balcony door was open. Tate took notes carefully. You didn't hear a splash? A struggle? Simone shook her head. Only the wind. And then the silence. It was wrong. Do you believe he jumped? A long pause. No, she said finally. David loved himself too much to jump. That answer made Tate raise an eyebrow. Next was Rico Alvarez, the deckhand. Muscular, tattooed, and nervous. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair as Tate questioned him. His answers were clipped, defensive. I was below deck when it happened. I never touched the guy. Yes, Simone was beautiful, but I never crossed a line. But when asked about his whereabouts the night before, Rico hesitated. Just long enough for Tate to notice. You were on the stern deck around 10 p.m., correct? Yeah, I was tightening the sail clamps. Alone, I guess. I didn't see anyone else. And you didn't hear a scream? A fall? No, just the storm. Tate scribbled a note. Did you have any reason to want David Barrett dead? Rico's face turned red. No, ma'am. But if I did, I'd have pushed him over in daylight. Poor choice of words. She flagged it. Marla the chef was next. She was precise, calculated, and emotionally distant. She claimed no allegiance to either Simone or David. "I cook. I clean. I don't meddle." But when asked about what she heard, Marla leaned forward, lowering her voice. "The night he disappeared, I heard voices, arguing. Around midnight. Male or female? Both. Did you recognize them?" A pause. "Simone. And maybe Rico. That complicated things." Back on deck, the Coast Guard officers reviewed the footage from the yacht's limited security system. The cameras had blind spots, including inside the suite and on the balcony. But one camera caught a key moment. Simone walking barefoot in the corridor shortly after midnight, drenched, visibly shaking. No sign of David. No one had seen him after dinner. And then they found something odd in the ship's trash compartment. A partially burned t-shirt. It was blood-stained. The fabric matched one David had worn earlier in the trip. Why was it there? Who tried to destroy it? Tate gathered her notes. 3 things were now certain. David Barrett was dead or lost at sea. Blood on the sheets indicated a violent event occurred in the suite. Someone on board was lying. Without a body, proving murder was tough. The carefully crafted image of Simone and David Barrett's perfect life shattered. David Barrett, a wealthy entrepreneur, was missing. Blood found on the yacht confirmed a violent struggle. Simone Barrett, a former model and social media influencer, was now a prime suspect, along with everyone else on board. At the police station, Tate pieced together evidence. David's blood was found in large amounts on the bed, too much for an accident. A burned t-shirt recovered from the trash had his blood and skin hastily destroyed. Simone's phone revealed deleted, recovered texts with Rico, her lover, discussing escape and threats. Photos showed intimate moments between Simone and Rico, some taken aboard the yacht the very morning David disappeared. When confronted, Simone broke down, admitting a fight, but claiming David stabbed himself and then went overboard. She denied killing him but admitted panic and fear. Rico, questioned separately, confessed to the affair but denied any role in the death, though he had no alibi. Forensic divers found David's blood-stained shirt and a weighted anchor chain tangled with fabric underwater. His body still missing. 3 days later, a fishing boat found David's body 6 miles from the yacht. The badly decomposed corpse showed a deep puncture wound and ligature marks on his ankle, tied to a heavy object, likely the anchor chain. Autopsy revealed he drowned but was alive when he went overboard. This turned the case from possible suicide to clear homicide. Simone was arrested for second-degree murder and evidence tampering. She insisted she loved David but felt trapped. Rico admitted helping Simone clean up and burn evidence but denied killing David. The investigation had just begun, but one thing was certain. Someone on the Golden Siren was guilty. Rico was charged with accessory after the fact, tampering with evidence, and obstruction. Now both lovers were behind bars. Public opinion splintered. Some saw Simone as a victim, trapped in a cold marriage with a controlling man. Others saw her as the classic femme fatale, manipulative, beautiful, and deadly. But the truth was murkier. Evidence showed that David discovered the affair shortly before the trip. Investigators found an email draft on his tablet, unsent, addressed to his attorney. "If anything happens to me on this trip, look into Simone. She's hiding something. She wants me gone." Whether he was being paranoid or prophetic, he was now dead. But the final chapter had not yet been written. Court proceedings loomed. And one question still haunted everyone involved. Was this crime of passion, or was it premeditated murder? The courtroom was packed. Simone Barrett, dressed in black, pleaded not guilty. Her defense painted her as a victim of abuse. The prosecution called her a cold manipulator. Photos, text messages, and blood evidence were shown. Rico Alvarez testified reluctantly, admitting to cleaning up the scene. His deal reduced his sentence in exchange for honesty. The jury watched Simone's confession video. Tears didn't save her. The facts were too strong. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned guilty of second-degree murder. Rico was sentenced to 3 years for obstruction. Simone received 25 years to life. She collapsed in court. Her family sobbed.